Thank you, Anthony. I will keep this really short and sweet because I could go on for hours, and I'm really going to just pick up on some of the key points here. But first of all, just to say that we're specialists in communications and consultation for major projects and infrastructure. And it's our job to explain to the general public really what our industry is about, whether it's on projects or whether it's actually the issues around infrastructure. And in our day job, we found very much that the general premise is that actually infrastructure is really challenging. It certainly is that, certainly from a public perspective. But what the story is that tends to be told is that, of course, it's actually about opposition. And we wanted to challenge that premise and decided to do some research around that. Hence, a report that we commissioned, or rather some research we commissioned at the back end or second half of last year after the election, because we really wanted to test out really what public attitudes actually are. And it's really quite surprising, really, what the results were. And I'd like to just touch on some of the key points that came out of it. Our hunch was very much that there's a silent majority who's very much in favour of infrastructure. And I think the result that we came out with that I think surprised even us was that actually 87% of the British people who we asked actually support infrastructure investment. And not only that, is that they actually aspire to world-class infrastructure or to have really solid improvements to what we already have. Amanda was talking earlier about growth and value, and what we're doing is really looking at how we bring people into the equation, because I think they sometimes get forgotten. It's the likes of you and me. Why are we actually having infrastructure in the first place? It's because we want to have a better world in which we live and to make our lives easier and better. So some of the other things that we were asking was really, okay, if you're up for infrastructure, what is it that is currently concerning you at the moment? What would build your confidence? Because there were caveats attached to this support, as you'd expect. And part of that response was very much that people want to be involved. We actually asked people whether or not they knew about the National Infrastructure Plan. And I'm afraid only 6%, you'll see in that bottom right-hand corner, actually know about a plan. And one of the criticisms that we have, I think, both from a government point of view and from industry, is that it's not perceived that it's joined up. Again, Amanda was talking about connectivity earlier on. I don't think people believe that we're actually connecting all the dots, and that's what's absolutely vital if we're going to get the story right in the future. And then, in addition to that, they want to be involved. At the moment, the perception is that it's being done to them as opposed to for them. You know, we react as individuals to something that's being presented to us. Sometimes our immediate reaction to that is to oppose it. I think it's our job in the industry to really tell a very positive story and to actually talk about the achievements. We've talked a lot about the Industrial Revolution and what that's brought for us in the last century. We're about to do the same now. We have to talk about both the achievements we've had, what we're currently doing, and what we can expect from the future, which will raise the aspirations that I think that 85% we're talking about. And finally, I think we want to make sure that we're actually telling the right story. What we found was that the reason why there is potential support out there is not just describing all the benefits. Yes, we have to tell the story about what it will do for UK PLC. We have to tell the story about whether it's going to bring regional opportunities, and Stu was using an example there. But it's about the social benefits. When we actually ask what it means to the likes of you and I, what we're really about is, well, how does that enable us to get, for example, from A to B? How do we get to work or get to school, take our children to school in a way that's much easier? Does it shave off 10 minutes? Does it make it more convenient? Does it give us access to new facilities? And really what we have to do, I think, as an industry, and politicians are being asked to do the same, is to tell that positive story. We shouldn't hide the negative impacts. Absolutely. We've heard just now about overhead lines. If you're somebody who's going to be looking at a new pylon, you're not going to be supportive of that proposition. But equally, what we're not doing is delving enough into really what the wider benefits are of the social positive impacts that can come with the investment that we're looking for. And that's really where I think there's a lot of work to be done, both as an industry and with government through the Treasury and through the National Infrastructure Commission, to make sure that we're actually bringing together what that really means for us, for you and I as a society. And there's a long, I think, piece of work to be done around how that gets delivered. But if we start to talk about the positives, start to talk about what these benefits really are, I think we're going to start to have a bit of a game changer in terms of what public attitudes really are about. It's not going to be done overnight. It'll take a while. It's certainly something that we have to do together. We all have to play our part, and I see a very positive future if we can really start to change our ways of managing how we talk to the public, and to bring them in very early on and to encourage them to be very much a part of this conversation. Anthony.
Thank you very much, Linda. What fascinates me about the work that you did, Linda, is that I suppose while we hear an awful lot from the vocal minority, there is a huge weight of opinion across the general public that we should be building more, we should be investing in. I mean, how do you get across the problem of this vocal minority which seems to grab the headlines?
I think, honestly, it's the fact that where we currently come from is that a lot of communication and consultation or engagement is driven by projects. So I think there are two levels. I believe the National Infrastructure Commission has a job to do to explain to us, the UK public, how all of this fits in and really what the benefits are going to be. Very much what Amanda was talking about earlier. And then secondly, if we as an industry come in and start to talk about and join that story up, in other words, they talk about the first few chapters of why we're doing this, why are we investing? Well, it's for all our benefits. And then we bring it in at a project level and take up that thread. And instead of just leaping into the technical detail, we need to bring people along from that point to explain what the wider opportunity is for them. And if they actually participate, they genuinely have an opportunity to help shape how this has developed for their local benefit as well as a national benefit.
Any questions that people want to put to Linda? Yeah, here we go.
Hi there. That was fascinating. Thank you. To what extent do you think that the centralisation of decision making in this country has created that negative, some of those negative impressions?
I think there is an area that can be attributed to centralisation. I think if you turn it on its head, and we look at what the National Infrastructure Commission is aiming to do, that's a positive centralisation. But one of the things I think that we've subsequently found, and as a result, since we launched this report, we've actually taken some soundings from industry in the last couple of months. And one of the areas I think that's really interesting is, again, the point that Amanda was talking about was around the role of devolution. And yes, there's a lot of focus on the Northern Powerhouse, but what we need to ensure is that actually there's the same opportunities across the UK, that other cities and other city regions and city rural regions have similar opportunities. And I throw something out now. I wonder whether actually the next phase might be sort of, dare I say it, sort of regional infrastructure commissions, which is where sort of devolution comes in, where you start to have that decentralisation to empower those regions. We're seeing it through some of the city deals, obviously the introduction of mayors and the money that's going to flow and the governance that will flow from that. I think there is going to be a dual level, as it were, and I think we can address that.
Any more questions over this side? One moment.
Thank you very much. I'm a councillor from up north. You're right about a vocal minority, and the real problem with the vocal minority is if you don't communicate with the majority, that's when the rumour mill starts and you start losing it. You're thinking about we don't join up the dots. We definitely don't join up the dots. Absolutely. So the public are right on that, and there's no joined up thinking at all. I could give you several things. The dock expansion in Liverpool is considerable, and that's going ahead. billions, the second biggest development behind Crossrail in the country, and that's going ahead. And now they're thinking about consulting about a road, how are you going to get access to it, and that. So yes, there's no joined up thinking. You go on the power. Just talked over there. The power. We're supposed to be growing the economy, but where are we going to get the power from? Sizewell C. If I'm trying to get an energy lagoon. There's just no joined up thinking, and when you get politicians to start thinking about that, I don't think you can.
Thank you very much. Linda, any view on, I suppose, getting that joined up thinking going?
Well, I personally think that we all have a responsibility to try and achieve that, because if we don't, then it's a fatalist approach. So, yes, we have the National Infrastructure Commission, whose job it is to look at the overall picture. They can't possibly solve all of that joined up thinking in the way that you're describing, which is why I think there is a regional role to play, and that hasn't evolved fully yet. But I do think that we as an industry should be doing a lot more to try and help join up those dots. It won't be a solution, but it will go some way towards it.